The end of the American frontier era and the rise of industrialization set the stage for Red Dead Redemption 2's thrilling gunslinger narrative. Life on the trail, living as outlaws in a society bent on order and conformity, where the cities are a prison and your horse is your freedom. But behind that backdrop lurks an ever-present, ever-dangerous threat to the livelihood of our heroes in the Vanderlyn gang. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, I bet you can guess that I'm going to say capitalism. And you're right! The focus of this video is going to be on why Dutch needs more money. Just kidding. Instead, I want to analyze the main antagonist of this game. Nope, not Micah. Not Dutch either. Not the rifts between Dutch and Arthur that slowly tear the gang apart. Not the rapid industrialization that threatens the untouched beauty of the wild. And not the American military that is literally withholding life-saving medicine from Native American tribes. No, the villain, or villains I am referring to, are the main force that drives the game's plot. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, who operate at the behest of Leviticus Cornwall. From the game's outset, the gang is on the run from the Pinkertons after a botched job in Blackwater. The Pinkertons' pursuit of the gang drives the game's plot, as they are forced to flee their camp and relocate anytime they catch wind that the Pinkertons are getting close to finding them, leading to tensions rising between Arthur and Dutch, and the eventual dissolution of the group. While the world of Red Dead Redemption is based on a fictional American West, the Pinkerton Detective Agency was very much a real organization that was active in America as early as 1850, when it was founded in Chicago by Alan Pinkerton. The Pinkertons were mercenaries contracted for jobs ranging from security to private military contracting. At the height of their power, the Pinkertons were the largest private law enforcement organization in the world. While the agency still exists today, it does not hold the same power it once did. In Red Dead Redemption, the Pinkertons are portrayed as lawmen or organized bounty hunters. The real-life Pinkertons worked primarily as strikebreakers for capitalists during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Capitalists would hire Pinkertons to infiltrate unions and sow discord from within, or hire them as goon squads to intimidate workers out of striking. These practices often led to violence against union workers. Such was the case with the Homestead Strike of 1892. 300 Pinkerton agents were dispatched by Henry Clay Frick, an industrialist for Carnegie Steel in Pittsburgh, to break up a strike at his plant. The Pinkertons came armed with rifles, and a firefight broke out between the strikers and the Pinkerton agents. A resulting 40 strikers were injured and 9 were killed, while the Pinkertons suffered 20 injured and 7 killed. Closer to their portrayal in Red Dead Redemption, the Pinkertons were also hired as mercenaries to hunt outlaws. They hunted down the likes of Jesse James, the Reno Gang, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. This brings me to their role in Red Dead Redemption 2. During the opening chapter of the game, the gang robs a train of the region's oil baron, Leviticus Cornwall. With now 2 hits on Cornwall's business under their belt, Blackwater and now the train, Cornwall hires the Pinkertons to hunt down the Vanderlyn gang. Herein lies the problem with this whole situation. During the Wild West period of American history, there was often no formal government system, including law enforcement. In fact, the organization of our modern-day police force didn't exist until the 20th century. To that end, the law enforcement was subcontracted to organizations like the Pinkertons by the rich and powerful who had a vested interest in the land and wanted their capital protected. Therefore, laws and law enforcement developed around the principle of maintaining the class power structure and protecting the property of the capitalist. I think a lot of people miss the overarching themes of Red Dead Redemption 2, amongst all the yeehaw pew-pew cowboy stuff. Throughout the game, there is the theme of industrialism encroaching on the peaceful lifestyle of living out in the country. When the player first enters Saint-Denis, Arthur expresses his disdain for the city, how he feels like he's trapped in a cage. This metaphor effectively explains how the coercion of labor under capitalism has infected this land of freedom. The dream of living out in the solitude of the country is broken by the factories and oil drills, not to mention the way the natural landscape is affected. The industrial machine driven by capitalists forces its way in and disrupts the lives of those living off the land. This destruction of one's material conditions leads them to a choice, either give in to the capitalist machine or live free by whatever means necessary. Thus, we see the rise of outlaw life. These outlaws are only considered so because they violate the arbitrary laws put in place by the ruling class in order to protect their capital. The Vanderlyn gang robs Leviticus Cornwall not because they are evil or morally corrupt, but because it's necessary for them to maintain their way of life. This act is only seen as wrong because it violates the laws put in place to protect Cornwall's businesses. How is it any less ethical than Cornwall coming into the region, displacing the Wapiti Native American tribe, building oil drills and kerosene plants, and coercing residents of the land into his factories? I like the way Dutch puts it.
You kill, I kill. You rob, I rob. Only difference I can see is I choose whom I kill and rob, and you destroy everything in your path.
One's material conditions greatly affect their willingness to take risks and go against the established system. Being poor and destitute makes one much more likely to commit petty robbery than if one is living comfortably. So if we look at crime through an economic lens, we can boil down most types of criminal action to desperation for survival. For example, let's take a look at this headline. A man robs a store in order to get money for his daughter's operation. Is he morally in the wrong for acting in desperation to save his daughter's life? If he had the material means to pay for his daughter's operation, or better yet, a system that guaranteed universal healthcare, this crime would never have happened. Rather than a legal system that punishes people for acting out of desperation, it would be much more effective to eliminate the system that causes that desperation. Instead, we have a justice system that is more focused on preserving the property of the capitalist class and punishing those who rebel against it. So what does this have to do with the Pinkertons? Well, they are the means with which Leviticus Cornwall is able to enforce his domination of the region and control the material conditions of its inhabitants. The threat of violence, whether that be jail time or straight up hanging, keeps most of the population suppressed and afraid of rebellion. The reason they are able to act as such a force is because there's nobody to hold them accountable for their actions, save for Cornwall himself, and he only cares that they get the job done and protect his property. This reaches the crux of the systemic issue with our law enforcement: accountability. Without any sort of accountability, law enforcement is essentially given a blank check to act however they like. If the law does not apply to them, what reason do they have for following it? Acting as mercenaries, the only way that the Pinkertons can be held accountable is if they fail to do the job they were hired to do. Therefore, acting through whatever means necessary to complete that job means they can use force, threats of violence, coercive tactics, whatever, as long as they finish the job. This essentially makes them Cornwall's own personal army to act at his behest. When you consider the 1-2 punch of degrading material conditions for the working class, and the threat of violence if they don't conform to the system, you get one of the most oppressive, government-sanctioned forces in the world. And while the Pinkertons' bloody history of strike-breaking and outlaw hunting is horrific, it doesn't compare to the organized, state-sanctioned violence of our modern police force. The thuggish band of mercenaries that were the Pinkertons have now been replaced by a thuggish band of taxpayer-funded police officers. Despite this change in organization, modern police still work on the behalf of the elite, capitalist class. Our justice system and legislative system work on behalf of the wealthy elite. They still serve to maintain the social hierarchy and protect the capitalist property, and by extension, the police, who enforce the laws created by the legislative system and feed into the judicial system, are working on behalf of the capitalist class as well. But what if we just follow the law? Then we have nothing to worry about, right? Well, ask this guy.
You have a fucking gun in your hand. I don't have a weapon. Drop it.
Zaid. Zaid.
Focus on me. Just focus on me. Focus on me. Focus on you. There's fucking 6 of you. Just relax. Put that object down. This is my property. We just want to talk.
Dude, there's 6 cops. Zaid has a clamp in his hand thinking
This is my
garbage.
boy's video right here. I fucking.
There's a camera right next to you.
2333. I live in room 304.
He lives here.
You are fucking threatening
This
me.
is family.
I live here. I'm a resident of this fucking property. I'm picking up garbage from my fucking dorm. I go to school here. I go to school here. Don't fucking tell me what to do. You guys don't have a goddamn fucking right to be doing this.
Or this guy.
Hello. I'm confused. He don't even live in Louisiana.
No. You don't. How can you tell me I have something you don't know my name? You just pulled up in front of my house and then. I don't trust. Cause you shaking like you scared or something. You're pulling.
Okay.
I trust you. You shaking like you scared.
He don't live in
No,
Louisiana.
I don't even live in Louisiana. How the hell would I have a warrant in Louisiana?
Quentin, you already said your name was that.
My name is not Quentin. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Put your hand by your...
Nah.
Sir, his name is
My
not
name is
Quentin.
fucking Quentin.
Then let's see the ID and we'll be done.
Okay, hold
You
on.
just told me three different names. You woke up and told me three different names.
Hold
That's
on.
the third
Chill
name
out.
you just...
Chill out.
No.
Notice what these two innocent men have in common? Disregarding for a moment that the laws are designed to keep the general population in subservience to the capitalist class, even when following the law, people of color, transgender people, or other minority groups are still subject to harassment and violence due to systemic prejudice. And why aren't these offending cops ever properly served justice? Because the ones who are investigating allegations into officer deviance are other officers. Efforts have been made dating back to the 1900s to create civilian oversight committees in some cities in order to help hold officers accountable. These have only been somewhat effective because they face heavy backlash from police unions and are unable to actually enforce any sort of punishment of police officers. This means that police wield a tremendous amount of power without the possibility of accountability. And since the laws are designed to benefit the rich while keeping the poor oppressed, simply by doing their job, the police are acting as tools of oppression. This is where the idea that all cops are bad comes from. Now, I may have lost sight of my original point just a bit, but in case it wasn't clear, I want to reiterate that capitalism causes wealth inequality, which leads to diminishing material conditions for the working class. With these material conditions comes the necessity to do whatever it takes to survive. Look at how the Vanderlyn gang, or any number of outlaws or criminals, live. The life of crime is not a life by choice. It is forced upon one by the capitalist machine. When laws are created to punish those just trying to get by, rather than dismantling the system that forced them into that lifestyle, the system is complicit in the creation of those criminals. And finally, when those laws are enforced, whether by private mercenaries or a government-funded police force, the ones enforcing the laws are acting with violence towards a marginalized group and only serving to uphold their oppression. The police do not serve the people. They serve the few, wealthy elite, and as such, all cops are bad. Thank you for sticking through this video with me. I hope it helps shed some light on the ways in which capitalist power structures use the police to keep us oppressed. If you'd like to see more leftist content, be sure to subscribe and also share this video so that together we can help create class consciousness. Thanks, comrade.